Hello, everyone. Welcome to Silent Mode Cafe. This is a weekly podcast on everything related to security, cybersecurity, and protecting you. We have an extremely interesting podcast for everyone today. I'm Vivek, and with me is
Salah. Here I am. Welcome. Everyone. So,
Welcome.
Vivek, tell me, man. A lot happened this week in the news. What are we going to talk about today?
So today we're going to talk about how it all went down. We'll talk about satellites, heat signatures, and the last mile. The last mile has always been something that Salah and I have been involved with for a long, long time when we were interns at a big company. So this is something that really hits home. But what we're talking about specifically is
we're talking about Nicolas Maduro.
Yes.
So a lot happened this week. Look, Maduro was reportedly captured in Caracas around, I think it was at the beginning of the year, January 3rd. And then he appeared in court in New York on the 5th, pleading not guilty, of course.
Yeah. And then right behind the headline, there is a second story, which is mostly related to misinformation and misleading clips, which spiked fast afterwards, which Wired covered. So
yeah, it widely covered. And look, lots of conversations out there. You probably saw some notes about how this went down. Without a doubt, we all fell in love with all the videos from what aspect, whether we agree with this politically, whatever. There's no conversation there. This is strictly about how we believe this went down from a cyber perspective. We saw how it went down from a military perspective. It was full of action. It was like watching a movie. But there are a lot of things that happen in the back end, right? Like, for instance, how are satellites utilized? How are other cyber warfare? And then, Vivek, a bit of muddying the waters, right? How did everything else happen?
I think the big thing and the coolest thing about it, this is not a political conversation like Salah said. This is more of a cybersecurity technical conversation. And the cool thing that truly brought it together was what is called as data fusion, which is not some one magical system in space that brought it together. It was a combination of a significant number of data points that came together for a successful execution, the way it went down. And it's something that, this country has invested in decades, right? This doesn't happen in one day. It all started post 9/11, and it's just a culmination of all the investments that have happened till date and a continuous investment of that infrastructure.
This and specific to this operation, without a doubt, this started weeks, days, months in advance to look at all the patterns. U.S. intelligence, without a doubt, had a heavy hand in supporting this, and from a cyber perspective, like monitoring electronic communications, and providing from other venues some supporting context, right?
Yes.
To be used maybe not exactly as a blueprint, but more of a supporting overlay of what was actually happening on the ground.
So the key idea in all of this is that there's a lot of modern tracking, which isn't reading context. It's something which is very simple, which is pattern detection. Who's active, when, where, and how routines change. And with regards to pattern detection, the accuracy rates, thanks to higher computing power, thanks to AI, over a period of time has become so accurate that the moment you start what Steve Jobs used to famously say, connect the dots, things come together super fast. But they have to come together, and you need to know which dots to connect.
So let's talk about it from this perspective. We all know, as you had mentioned, things had kicked off post 9/11. And over the past few years, the ability to send satellites up has incredibly, on an order of magnitude, exponential. Like I can't emphasize the impact that had. And the reality is the satellites, they don't need to see you anymore to be useful, right?
No.
So Vivek, let's talk a little bit about satellites, not as a tool, but as a stack. So the first aspect of the stack is optical imagery. Right.
So first, the older satellites, which you see today from your roofing inspectors or anyone who's doing land terrain, is optical imagery. So it takes a photograph. The photograph resolution over a period of time has become super accurate, right up to about a meter or less than a meter, sometimes even inches, right? But there are always, some cons to optical imagery. If there are clouds or if there's darkness, then obviously the accuracy goes away. But think of your older satellites, starting from Sputnik, which the Russians threw in space before Salah and I were born, was optical imagery. Like, hey, we're going to take a photograph of yours and see how you're doing.
So the
Uh,
problem with optical imagery are two big things, right? Clouds and darkness. But then comes
yes.
in a different type of satellites and advancement in technology that wasn't necessarily maybe focused on this type of a thing, but SAR radar satellites. What are those?
Yeah. So those are synthetic aperture radar. Aperture, however you want to pronounce it. They're called as SAR
Depending on your
radars.
English education.
Yeah, whatever accent. What it does is that it's an active radar. It's essentially a radar. It sends energy down and reads what bounces back. And then based on that, it can image at night through cloud cover. NASA explains SAR at a high level. It is a different kind of sensing than normal photos. That's what NASA says. As always, NASA being super transparent about what it does, it's a different kind of sensing, quote unquote, right? So,
And look, and how likely this helped, right, Vivek?
yeah,
SAR is perfect for change detection. Like I can take a blueprint of something or an image of something as a base, and if anything looked like it changed from yesterday, what's happening today, while it's not definitely, if we think about this from a Maduro, there is without a doubt assets on the ground. Um, and they detected him. And then the ability to track from this perspective is if they saw movement, something moved, something appeared, something changed, they have a bit of a blueprint aspect. But that's also not where it ends with it. Then there's the
there's the
real
another
need,
layer.
because what happens when I'm in a building, and what happens when things change? That's where thermal
Yeah,
infrared comes in, the heat
yeah,
signature aspect. Tell me a
yeah.
little more about the heat signature conversation.
So to that point, what happens if I'm in a bunker 100 feet under the ground? Right? How am I ever going to get detected? So that's where thermal infrared has come in, which is the third layer. Remember, we're talking about data fusion. It's a lot of data points coming together. And
Different
all of these are
satellites at
different
different
satellites.
angles, at different, you could have satellites at low Earth orbit, 5 miles, 10 miles, going up to 120 miles, depending on what this is. But the reality is, when people say they use satellites to see a heat signature, the realistic version is thermal imagery really can highlight heat anomalies and hint to activity like a recent running vehicle cluster, generators, or HVAC. It should be dark. It's
Building.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Building, compound suddenly shows more thermal activity than it did before, right?
Re- Remember, we are all human beings and we emit thermal energy. There's energy within. Like I'm talking like very yoga-esque right now. There is energy within. And there truly is energy within. We emit thermal energy. People might say otherwise. We're animals. We emit energy, or we are better than monkeys, or and
We
etc. But
definitely
keeping
emit
that
some sort
aside,
of a heat, right?
yes, we emit heat. If you're alive, you're emitting heat. If you've turned blue, you're not emitting heat. So so it's less thermal sees the person and more thermal suggests which places are active. So that's the third layer. We're calling it layer C. And then you
So,
want to
and
talk about
then
layer D?
let's talk about layer D. Go for it.
No, it's RF geolocation satellites, which is find the radio emitter layer. So these are a new set of satellites. Salah, you want to talk about those?
Well, here's the piece that people miss. You can sometimes locate the source of a radio signal from space, right? Think of things like a certain radio, transmitters, that kind of a thing, using satellite constellation designed specifically for RF mapping. Hawkeye 360 is well known in the commercial space, and you can Google this and really look this up.
Yeah. And again, it's not magic, right? It's a way to say there's an emitter in the area, usually with an uncertainty region, and then you combine it with the other layers. Guess what's an emitter that we have all the time with us? It's our phone. and that emits radio signals. And so the moment you start tracking radio signals of a specific person emitting a specific heat signature, you can start connecting the dots very quickly.
And this
So,
is what people mean by pinpointing, right? You take these weak clues, you add on thermal anomaly, radar change, maybe the RF hints such as your phone, and there's always the human intel side of it. There's always eyes on
yes,
the ground, and
yes.
when these overlap, you get a picture. So a little conjecture here, right, Vivek? Tell me how you think some of this stuff came together, maybe months before, and how, just from a satellite perspective, we'll get into some of the cyber warfare conversations and the hacking conversations that probably happened on the day of, um, the apprehending of Maduro himself. But tell me, in your mind, how do you think this played out? Maybe weeks or months prior to.
Well, well, it's
This is all, folks.
it,
This is all opinion based. We're not
this is all
divulging
opinion
anything here.
based, and there were reports that this planning started months in advance, and by months they said somewhere in October, November, where they had human intel, and then they started observing the behavior of the person of interest, and then from there they started figuring out where the movements were. That's where satellites come in, human intel come in, and then they started connecting all the patterns together. So it was a classic data collection that started, I think, earlier than November. They're just saying November, but I can imagine they've been doing this for persons of interest throughout the globe for a long period of time. And they have it in wonderful dossiers somewhere, which are no longer paper that you see in Jason Bourne movies, but stored in a computer somewhere
Yeah,
in
that's
Utah,
right.
and I'll keep it there. Um, but that's how it typically happens, is data
Yeah.
collection,
So,
and then
folks,
just
probably
connecting the
like
dots.
if I was going to story tell this, it was a early on, like Vivek was saying, when the decision, who knows when the decision was made. It sounds like public decisions started, what, October, November?
I think the political decision was made in October, November. That's what happened.
Yeah, and assets on the ground probably quickly reacted to that. Someone had eyeballed him at an event, at a speech, at a dinner, at his wherever he um, was at that point. They
That's
identified
human
him,
intel. Yeah,
and that human intel quickly fed into pinpointing his geolocation, and then bam, and then it started. Then it's like, okay, here's the vehicle he has, here are the people he's around, here are the devices in that area, here are all the heat signatures that each individual puts off, here are the heat
yeah,
signatures, the RF signals that his devices put off, and it's
yeah,
all started like breadcrumbs.
yeah,
Wherever he had moved from that point on, whatever had happened from that point on, there was breadcrumbs following.
yeah, including his security detail. So it
They all
wasn't
did,
only his
and birds of a
his
feather, right?
signatures.
And typically
Yeah.
these guys have some sort of a tight circle. So wherever that tight circle seems to be coming back together, is a tattletale. So
So
talk to me a
once,
little bit,
yeah,
from. I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you going to
no,
say
go
there?
ahead, go ahead,
Yeah,
say
talk
it.
to me a little bit about where you think from an advanced warfare, because okay, so that's the how we tracked, that's the how we found out, that's the how we figured out where Maduro was, and
Right.
with all that intel. But then there was a lot more happening, right? There was things that happened from a cyber warfare that shaped the actual environment of that day.
So that happens on the day off, or there. Well, not on the day off. There is practice that's done before the
Mm.
D-Day. And that practice is essentially advanced cyber warfare, which is when boots, before they get on the ground, uh, cyber warfare kicked in, and there have been reports on how it was done. It was mostly related to three major things: denial, deception, and tempo control. Denial was making coordination harder at the worst moment, which we've been talking about in our podcast series, typically known as a denial service, DOS, or a denial of service attacks, which essentially overwhelm systems to be able to react or communicate.
What kind of
Deception, right?
systems are we talking about here? Just
It
to kind
could
of paint
be
the picture a little bit.
it could be communication systems. It could
Hmm.
be tech systems. It could be hacking gates. It could be hacking doors. anything related to, to anything controlled by a computer, right?
Yeah,
And,
and look,
and
and
compromising it.
compromising it, right? And then there's the deception aspect, where you create an image through what you think you are tracking as a result of denial. And suddenly you feel like you have the right signals and you're reacting to things and making what you think are confident decisions, that are wrong. So, such as, hey, our satellites are showing there's a lot of movement happening in the north, while really that was just an entire deception play. And really everything was happening in the south, and all the helicopters, the manpower, the et cetera, were moving in from the
All
south,
the
as an
stealth was
example.
moving through the south, as an
Again,
example, right?
all conjecture, right?
There's conjecture and there are reports too, right?
There's
And then,
reports. Though all of
yeah,
this is tied into reports, folks. So
yeah,
you can read things on U.S. Space Force, do searches. All this information is kind of sprinkled and layered in different types of outlets
right.
that you could hear about.
And then the third piece was controlling the tempo, right? There were reports that when the Delta Force landed and had boots on the ground, they completely overwhelmed the entire compound. Caracas was in a blackout. People didn't know what was going on, overwhelming firepower. They knew exactly who to hit, when to hit, which was just crazy. And then they used weapons that have never been used before, which is sonic weapons, which we don't know much
Right.
about,
Well,
frankly
by the way,
speaking.
I don't know if that's been confirmed. I know we're hearing about this. I don't know if the government came out and said yes,
No,
but
yeah, it
there's
came from the
reports.
Venezuelans, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it came from the Venezuelans, but there's definitely, Wired did report on misleading visuals, rumor floods after that capture, right? So the visuals were like, who knows if that city, the people listening to their news outlets, thought that he was captured before he was actually captured, right? The misinformation on that day was so huge. The infosec warfare was so huge. People didn't know what was happening. But like Vivek was saying, the reason that this matters is if you disrupt that decision cycle, you don't need to win. You definitely don't need to win with code. And it's definitely not like one hack from a cyber perspective that did this, right? You win by just breaking coordination from that perspective. And there are many signs from all the reports that we're hearing, that we're seeing, that is cyber warfare. Kudos to Delta Force for boots on the ground, but cyber warfare played a huge aspect on the intel for them moving in. And that brings us, Vivek, to another layer to add to this, right? So how did you go from an active building, for
to the
example, to
exact
an
location.
yeah, how do you do that? That part is easy to oversimplify. Satellites can help you spot interesting places, but exact person, exact room, exact time, that is some advanced telemetry.
Yeah, so let's do the math because we said it's always a data fusion and math is your best friend. And pattern recognition is one of the cornerstones of a wonderful subject that all should study really hard, which is mathematics, the foundation of everything. So think of it as this. We had the space layer that we talked about, which narrows the map, patterns, and anomalies. We have the air layer, which is our dear friends with drones, planes, sensors, which are flying, right? And it
There are a lot of
refines
drones
timing.
reported, many drones reported.
Hundreds of drones or thousands
Yeah.
of drones were reported, right? That refines timing and identification. And then the third layer is the ground layer, which confirms and executes, which is a combination of human intel, as well as it's mostly human intel, in addition to obviously a lot of the cyber warfare attacks and proximities and compromising of systems.
So Vivek, you mentioned the space layer. That really helped them narrow kind of the map, right? With
Right.
probably some advanced pinpointing that we just don't know about. We don't know the level of complexity that U.S. Department of Defense truly has here. Then there was the air
Department of
layer, which
War,
was
yeah.
Department of War.
Department of Flowers, whatever you want to call
Department of
it.
Flowers, Department of Peace, whatever they fancy themselves as these days.
Yes.
The drones, the planes, and then, as you mentioned, the devices that we hold in our hands
Yes.
help
Which emit radio
pinpoint
signals. Yes.
a lot more than just emit radio signals. They're active listening devices, right?
Yes.
So This is also why heat signatures from space, they're misunderstood. Space thermal is coarse, but it's saying that this place suddenly is behaving like it's occupied and it's powered, right?
And to your earlier point, Salah, thanks to the
Pointed at me.
explosion, or not the
Oh,
explosion,
okay.
thanks to the significant magnitude of satellites that we can launch now, thanks to companies like SpaceX, you got to give them kudos, right?
You have
Like
to
they
give it.
can launch hundreds of satellites, bring the rocket down, and within 40 minutes, fuel up and launch another 100 satellites. 90% of the satellite launches are done by SpaceX throughout the world. So now you have 24 by 7 by 365 coverage of all kinds of satellites.
Yeah, there's in the networking world, there's this thing called N+1, right? And it's called meaning redundancy. You have something
Redundancy,
plus
yeah.
one. You have a satellite that tracks Salah's location, and then you have a backup satellite. And in this case, there's probably a mesh of satellites, um,
It's mesh
and
based,
and
which talk to
from
each other. So mesh is
which
they're
talk to
talking to
each
each other.
other, share telemetry, correlate telemetry, thanks to the wonderful world of AI. And it's we can only imagine the level of information that they were able to pick up there. So
And pattern recognize in a microsecond, in split seconds, because just the computing power available to do that, the mathematics and the data algorithms behind it, and the AI automation behind it is just next level.
yeah, and look, how do we roll into look? This is truly at the end of the day a little bit about us as well, right? About the regular people, because we have all these devices. So you and I, Vivek, were just talking about all this, and we're thinking, wait a minute, satellites. That's what Google Maps is giving me. That's what my daily map is doing.
Yes.
My device, dude, I use this every day. Are you telling me that this is listening to me? My camera that I'm looking at right now as I speak to you, the microphone I'm using, the mouse that I have with a laser in it that has vibrations every time I say something. And if something is looking at vibrations in the house, it's reading everything I'm saying. Not that I'm so quiet that they need to look at laser vibrations. They can probably just there's 100 other ways to do it. But the point is that sonic technology, tracking technology, um, it's great. But look, folks, your phone, your photos, your routines, your smart devices, they do create signals and they do create breadcrumbs. Not just what you're doing in the cyber world, but they do also do it on other areas. Now, thankfully, none of us are people of interest to the government. This doesn't happen on a mass. We're no way in any way suggesting that this is happening.
Right.
We're talking about from a cyber warfare perspective, and lots of conjecture here. We're coordinating a lot of different things that we see, that we know about, that we read about. U.S. Space Force posted, Wired posted. We all saw the many different videos. We saw there's even experts out there in these specific areas that are talking about, hey, here's how we believe the radar technology was utilized, whatever it may be.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is we're also looking at breadcrumbs and putting the picture together.
That's right. We're telling you
So
a story right now.
we're telling you a story, and uh, of how it all comes together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Salah, for our regular viewers, do you want to give them an action checklist? Please don't
So
be paranoid. It's bringing all the data together. Fascinating. We wanted to share this
exactly.
because it's
Look, this is
fascinating
just
as to what
fascinating.
we're
I
able
hope you
to
look
do.
at this just from an entertainment perspective, slight education perspective. Um, there is a lot of really cool advanced tech out there. We know that the drone world is exploding in its ability for tech. I mean, we never talked about it on this podcast, but apparently in the Northeast, there was hundreds of unidentified flying objects in that area slash drones, and tons of conversations there. Hey, we saw drones popping out of the water. We saw drones diving back into the water. We saw drones that we couldn't identify what it looked like, and drones that were moving at speeds that we didn't understand. There's a lot of advanced tech out there, which, by the way, we figured out it was announced, right? who and what was going on in the Northeast.
I think some of it was announced, right?
Some of it was announced. I think Palantir was one of them. I think the U.S. government, without a doubt, took some responsibility. So it
Then
wasn't that the government didn't know. They just didn't know if they could tell you, I think.
And the third were aliens, in case you missed that.
Aliens, look, and by the way, that's definitely my favorite one. Are the aliens are here. They're checking us out. They're looking at our behavior. That could definitely be it. But grounding this back, the reality is we minus the spy vibes, right? Let's keep our devices updated. This is something as simple as just updating all your devices. Constantly keep them updated. Always use your passkeys, two-factor. I do suggest you audit location permissions. Open your phone. If you have any suspicion that you feel like, I don't like my phone tracking me for whatever personal reason. I know I don't. I turn off all location services. I'm very limited on what I allow to have location about me and when.
Yeah, like WhatsApp doesn't need to know where your location is, so you turn it off.
WhatsApp doesn't need to know your freaking location. If
or
you need
Instagram.
to tell someone where you are, you can tell them, you know?
Yeah.
Do you really need to tag your actual location with every picture that you take, right? If you want
Please don't.
Please don't. Please don't take a picture of something, upload it to social media, and then, you know,
and say I'm on vacation in Ireland, and then suddenly your house in California, you know.
Yeah.
It gets an unsolicited visit. Please don't do that.
Yeah, avoid the real-time location stuff. Separate your home devices. You know, we all have guest Wi-Fi ability with our home device, and many of us use it. You know, maybe you separate your home devices by guest Wi-Fi. Maybe you put all the devices around your house, like your Alexas and your outdoor cameras and stuff, put them on your guest Wi-Fi. And that way they can't listen to the conversation that you're having with your bank on your WhatsApp or your bank communication on your web browser.
Especially your pesky cousins when they visit you, throw them on the guest Wi-Fi, please.
And then, you know, coming back to the AI world, is if Salah calls you and he says, hey, I just got off the podcast, my funds are short, and can you please quickly Venmo me some money? You know, wait a little bit, verify it, maybe text me directly and say, hey, are you actually calling me on FaceTime right now? And asking for money. Right.
Yes. And remember the theme, right? Most pinpointing comes from multiple small cues overlapping, not one big superpower or one big thing.
That's right. All right, folks, that's it this week. And thank you for joining. I hope you find this entertaining. If there's any aspect of this that you want us to dive a little deeper on, happy to dive in as much as we know, as much as we can. Visit Silent Mode Cafe. Check out our chat GPT to secure yourself. Ask it questions. How do I secure myself against AI fraud, for example, and see what kind of advice it gives you. With that, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.